Another Wednesday night minute here, considering God's creative work in animals. Now, even as a believer, there are times that without trying to, you will question the power of God. Don't you have those times? When you do so, you find yourself living. Here's when you know you're questioning the power of God. When you live or make a decision as if there is no God. Or when you fret as if there is no God. And at such times, to rebuild your assurance in the power of God, simply observe what He's created. When you look at what God's done, it gives you assurance in who God is and what He's capable of doing. Because in God's case, the Creator is always bigger than the creation. And that's not necessarily true with us. We create things like skyscrapers in New York City that can destroy us. We create things all the time that destroy us. But God creates nothing that He Himself cannot destroy or control. So let's go ahead and consider a couple of animals that will bring that to mind. Let's see, we've looked at an animal from the mammal family. We looked at last week the sparrow from the bird family. Reptiles and amphibians. Scripture refers to a few of those, specifically by name. He refers to the behemoth, chameleon, cobra, frog, gecko, Leviathan, lizard, monitor lizard, serpent, snake, and viper. Why don't we just go ahead and consider the behemoth and the Leviathan? And everybody has ideas about those, and or if you've never heard of them, you find the Leviathan in a few different places, but you find the behemoth only in one place, and that is the book of Job. We're going to look at Job, chapter 40, chapter 41, and look at both of these animals. Now, remember I said a couple of weeks ago, many of the Old Testament animals, many of the Hebrew names given to the Old Testament animals are unknown to us, probably because the animals are extinct. And so now we don't know exactly what these are. That would be the case with the behemoth and the Leviathan. Their identities are unknown. They're likely extinct. Now, based on their description, I'm going to go with the belief that they were large reptiles. And I'll point that out as we work through the text. But listen, you don't have to know exactly what kind of animals these were in order to get the point. Remember what was going on here. Job had undergone horrible trials. He knew it wasn't because of some sort of punishment God was putting him through. He was never claimed to be a sinless man, but he knew there was no sin in particular in his life that God was judging him for through these trials. He understood that much. But he didn't know why God would allow this to happen to him. And so he called God to account for himself. In essence, he put God on the stand and demanded an answer of the Lord. And God's answer was not to account for himself, but to ask Job, how big do you think you are that you can call me to account? That's essentially what the last several chapters of the book of Job is God's very lengthy answer in which, in a sense, he gives Job the riot act and is building a case that Job is in no position to demand anything of the Lord. He's in no position to demand an answer or to question God and ask God to give an account of himself. And part of the way God does that, or really a big way God does that, is just to point Job to all of God's creation and say, look at everything I've made and consider how small you are. And part of that creation is his wildlife. And he mentions a couple of animals by name. And this is not figurative language. He's really looking at real animals here. Job chapter 40, the behemoth. You see this in verse 15. It says, look now at the behemoth. Look, Job, at the behemoth. which I made along with you. Okay. Who is this behemoth? Well, he says he eats grass like an ox. Well, we get the idea this is a land animal because he eats grass. Okay. If this is a dinosaur, it's probably not the T-Rex. T-Rex was a meat eater. There were lots of big dinosaurs, big lizards, that were herbivores. They ate grass. Now, some would hold this to be a hippopotamus, because of some of the further descriptions, as we'll see in a minute. I'm not so sure. Continue on. Verse 16 says, see now, his strength is in his hips. And that's true. Hippos have big hips. But he also says, and his power is in his stomach muscles. I'm not sure you look at the stomach of a hippopotamus and think of a six-pack of abs. But he also says he moves his tail like a cedar. You think of a cedar tree and how it would move. It wouldn't be quick. It is a monstrous tree moving around. A tail that moves like a cedar would be a slow moving tail. Have you ever seen the tail of a hippopotamus? It's a wispy little thing. He also says in verse 17, the sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. Evidently, on this animal, you could see the muscles in its thighs. All right. Continue on, verse 18. His bones are like beams of bronze. Of course, we've all seen replicas of dinosaur bones as they've been put together in museums. And big dinosaurs, big bones, they're incredible. And I'm sure that people that lived in the day of the dinosaur, and we know they did because dinosaurs were created in the same 6-day span that man was, people saw dinosaur bones from time to time. Said his ribs like bars of iron, verse 19. He is the first of the ways of God. Or another way to say that is he is the best of the ways of God. In other words, if you want to consider the power of God, look at this animal and you get the idea. That's what he's saying here. This animal best pictures God's power. It says in verse 19, only he who made him can bring near his sword. In other words, any man that tries to take down the Leviathan with a sword is foolish. The only one that can do that is God himself. Verse 20, surely the mountains yield food for him, and all the beasts of the field play there. He lies under the lotus trees. This was not the same lotus tree that was found throughout Africa. This was probably a big bush that provided a lot of shade. He lies under the lotus trees in a covert of reeds and marsh. So he lived in marshy wetlands. That's why some believe it might have been the hippopotamus. And it is true that the hippopotamus is a powerful animal. I don't know why the hippopotamus found its way to be a cute animal in children's books. Always smiling. Hippos are dangerous. They've done a lot of damage. They'll sink boats, knock people out of boats. They've killed a lot of people. And they are powerful. They live in marshy areas. In verse 22, the lotus trees cover him with their shade. The willows by the brook surround him. Again, more marshy area, the brook, the willows. Indeed, the river may rage, yet he is not disturbed. So you see, this animal lives a lot in the river, okay? And yet the current doesn't bother him. He is confident, though the Jordan gushes into his mouth, spends a lot of time with his head in the water, eating. And he takes he takes water in the mouth when he does that. And again, the hippo does that as well. It says, though he takes it in his eyes, though he takes the water in his eyes, or one pierces his nose with a snare. This animal can handle it. There were, again, the tail is the convincing thing to me. The tail, the stomach muscles, the thighs, those aren't as descriptive of a hippo as they are of a powerful dinosaur. And archaeological discoveries of dinosaur bones have found out that there were many big dinosaurs that lived in the wetlands. lived in the water. I think the Brachiosaurus might be one of those found in North America, but most likely there in the Middle East or back where Job lived, there were huge dinosaurs that lived in the water. Whatever this animal is, it is titled the Behemoth. And then God moves on to number 2, the Leviathan. The Leviathan is found to be even more frightening and fierce. Job chapter 41. Just keep right on reading there. Go into verse 1. It says, this is a rhetorical question. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? And again, don't really know what the Leviathan is, but the description suggests it's a sea creature. Okay, this is an animal that lives in the water. Can you draw him out with a hook or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? In other words, can you fish for the Leviathan? The answer is no. It's too big for that. Can you put a reed through his nose? Verse 2. Some have suggested this might be a whale. The nose, maybe, but it sounds like it could be something more pronounced than a whale's nose. Verse 2. Or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make supplications to you? Will he speak softly to you? Will he make a covenant with you? Will you make him a servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you leash him for your maidens? Will your companions make a banquet for him? Will they apportion him among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? The answer to all of these questions is absolutely not. The Leviathan was, whatever it was nothing to mess with. It says in verse 8, lay your hand on him. Remember the battle, never do it again. There's some things you do that you only do once if you survive. Messing with the Leviathan was one of those things. You just couldn't get a lasso on this animal. Verse 9, it says, indeed, any hope of overcoming him is false. Shall one not be overwhelmed at the sight of him? Must have been an incredible creature. And you could say like a great white shark, but I'm not sure if people in Job's day got a lot of glimpses at the great white. But a dinosaur, an aquatic dinosaur, sea-living creature, might have made itself more visible. Okay. Verse 10, no one is so fierce that he would dare stir him up. Isn't that something? Then he says, who then is able to stand against me? So this is a creature that no matter how many harpoons you have in the boat and how many men you have in the boat, you're not going to beat the Leviathan. You're not going to do that. And yet, who created the Leviathan? If you can't stand against the creation, how will one defeat the Creator? In Job's day, men could not defeat these beasts. Some have suggested the Leviathan might have been an alligator, but see, men could defeat the alligator. You get a few guys with spears that know what they're doing, they could kill the alligator. But this beast could not be destroyed. In fact, in Job's day, way back then, there were just certain creatures that men could not kill. Now, that's not true today. It was then, but not now. Today, mankind has developed incredible weaponry and has just gotten so good at killing. There's really no animal that mankind cannot overcome and destroy. Okay? But that wasn't true in Job's day. But even still today, even though man has the power to kill any kind of creature, consider the power of a lion or a polar bear or a great white shark or a grizzly or a Cape buffalo or a hippopotamus or a rhino or an elephant or anything like that. Would you want to go up against one of those single-handedly? Probably not. Those are still powerful animals and they still destroy. And as powerful as they are, And as powerful as the Leviathan and the Behemoth were, how much more the one who created them? Verse 10 again. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has preceded me that I should pay him? Everything under heaven is mine. I've read in Christian books by Christian authors, I've heard other Christians say, if you're mad at God, it's okay. It's okay to be angry at God, and tell him you're mad at him, he can take it. Job didn't go so far as to yell at God. And still, look at the tongue lashing he got. Whether one actually yells at God or just responds the way Job did, the root problem is the same. It's calling God to account and implying that God is in the wrong. No, it is not okay to get mad at, yell at, or demand that God give an accounting of himself at all. Because to do so implies God's wrong. When you're tempted to do that, when you look around and you get frustrated and you want answers and you don't understand and you don't know why and things are not going the way you'd like, and you are tempted to question God, to call him to account, to get angry at him, just stop and think of the Behemoth or the Leviathan or any other of God's incredible creatures and consider God still has control of them. He's never lost control of his creation, and he's never lost control of your situation. There's a lot you can learn from God's animals. God bless. See you Sunday.